Hi everyone, my name is Bala Sankar. I am from Andhra Pradesh. I worked as a full stack Java developer in Aja Consulting Services. Now I am going to explain about how to implement insecurity by using login and registration. First, I would like to explain about what is Spring Security. Okay, Spring Security, one of the module of Spring Framework. Spring Security concept we can use to secure our web applications and REST APIs. To implement security, we need to know about two concepts. One is authentication, second one is authorization. What is meant by authentication? Authentication means verifying who can access our application. We can call it as authentication. What is authorization? Authorization means verifying which user can access which functionality is called authorization. Now I am going to tell about authentication flow. Okay, what is authentication? In authentication, Spring Security, the process of verifying the identity of the users. When a user sends the credentials like username, password, Spring Security validates them using authentication manager, user detail services, and password encoder. If credentials are correct, it a security context is created and stored, allowing the user to access secured endpoints. Now I am going to explain theoretical way with diagram. First, we can take suppose we know first one is authentication filter chain. Next one is authentication manager. Next one is authentication provider. In authentication provider, there are the two components. One is user detail service, and next one is password encoder. And the last one is security context holder. Security context holder. I can explain the flow. This is the flow. Actually, this is a authentication flow. First, authentication filter. What is authentication filter? Authentication filter means, this authentication filter means, first every request, whenever user will log in, like given username and password, that request will come to the authentication filter chain. Okay, authentication filter chain, every request go through the security filter chain. Okay, this is security authentication filter chain. Spring Secure creates multiple filters. Around 15 to 20 filters will be available. Mostly, suppose I can tell some examples in filter chains. DOO authentication filter chain, basic authentication filter chain, username password authentication filter chain, etc. More, around 15 to 20 filter chains are available in security authentication filter chain. These authentication filter chain will generate one token, that is called username password authentication token. That is the class. It will be created internally. Okay, that request will come to the authentication manager. What is authentication manager? Authentication manager is the main component of in Spring Security that handles authentication. It receives the username and password from the client, pass them to the configured authentication provider for the verification and return the authentication user. If the credentials are valid, it will be coming output is successful. If authentication is fails, is throw an exception. We can call it as authentication manager. Authentication manager give pass the request to authentication provider. What is exactly authentication provider? Authentication provider is one of who perform the actual authentication process. Okay, actual authentication process. This process, it is responsible to verify login credentials. It loads from the user details. Okay, it loads from the information from the database using user detail service interface, and checks the password using password encoder. That is also called as an interface. Password encoder is also an interface. If the credentials are successful, it returns the authentication object. It's not, it's throw an exception. We know about authentic user detail service. What is user detail service exactly? User details is used to fetch from the here database. I forgot to draw the database diagram. This is the database. Suppose user details, it means it is used to fetch the details from the database. Fetch from the details from the database based on the username. Based on the username. Once authentication provider calls find the user database name, it returns user details object based on containing username and encrypted password. Coming to password encoder. Password encoder is used to verify the entered password, which the encrypted password stored in the database. Okay. Finally, what I can say, authentication provider, inside there are the two components. One is user detail service and password encoder. Okay, authentication provider receives username and password, calls the user detail service and fetch database user details. Calls the authentication provider, calls the password encoder, that compare entered password with stored encrypted password. If both are the correct, it's successfully authentication. If it is not correct, throw a bad credential exception. Okay, these all the information is stored in the security context holder. What is security context holder? The security context holder is first, this is the core class. Okay, in Splunk security, it is used to store and retrieve the authentication information like logged in user details. For the current request execution, for a user is authenticated, we must store the user identity. Store it can be accessed throughout the application without rechecking credentials for every time. That's why we can use security context holder. This is the flow of authentication. Now I am going to tell how to implement the Spring security by using login and registration. Okay, first I can tell small steps. First, we can create first point. We can create Spring Boot application. Okay. Next, second point, we can add the required dependencies. Required dependencies. What are the dependencies? Spring Web Starter. Second one, Spring Data JPA. And MySQL connector. Next one is Spring Dev Tools. But the last one is we can add Spring Security Starter. These are the dependencies we must and should add the implementation, login and registration functionality. Then after configure database, configure data source properties. Okay, this is the second point. Okay, third point, data source. In application dot properties file. Okay, the next third one, Third one is create entity class and repository interface. This is the third point. And fourth point is implementing user detail service. Implementing user detail service class. Okay, next fifth one, create security config class. After then, sixth point is create REST controller with required methods. Required methods like registration and login. But the last one is we can run the application. Run the application and test in Postman. These are the steps we have to implement login and register. Okay, first we can create Spring Boot application, we can add the required dependencies, these are the dependencies, and configure data source properties with application.properties file. Then after we can create an entity class and repository interface. After implementing user detail service class and create security configure class, and then we can last one is controller, REST controller. We can create required methods and run the application and test in the Postman. Now we are going to we can do practically in IDE STS. First I will show you application.properties files. Okay. These are the database connection properties. This one spring.datasource.driver class name. Okay, what is this exactly? com.mysql.cj.jdbc.driver. Okay, when user app started, when your app started, Spring Boot loads the driver to create a database connection. This is the main connection. Okay, next one is spring.database.url. okay, this is JDBC and MySQL localhost and port number. This is the database name. Okay, this is the database URL. Okay, localhost, this is the localhost, database running locally. Okay, this is the database name, this is default port number of MySQL 3306. Spring Boot uses the URL to connect the database instance, extract database instance. These are the details, username and password. This is the MySQL credentials. To MySQL means it is my database. So these are the credentials I have to use. These are the Hibernate Auto DDL Auto. This is automatically update the database table structure based on the entity class. We can use this update. This is the SQL. show SQL. It means every time Hibernate executes, okay, every time Hibernate executes a query, if logs SQL, so developers can debugging easily. That purpose we can write this spring dot jpa dot show SQL true. This is circular reference. Allow means that depends on each other. Suppose they are the two classes, one is service A and service B. Okay, service A depends on service B depends on service A. At the time we are facing the problem circular dependency, so at the time we no need to internally what happen if two objects injected one another, spring may throw an exception. That purpose we have to write these statement. These are the database connection properties. Okay, now I am going to show about repository class. This is the repository class. We can give this annotation. This class says this is a Spring Data JPA repository interface is used to interact with the database. It provides ready-made CRUD operations and also support custom finder methods like find by mail. Without writing SQL queries manually, we can write these Spring Data JPA repository. Okay, I will explain public interface customer repository. Okay, this is an interface. We do not write implementations manually, and Spring Data JPA automatically generates the implementation at runtime. The purpose we can use these repository. Now I want to show entity class. This is the customer class. These are the fields, name, email, password and phone number. In this customer class I wrote these are the annotations at the rate entity, at the rate data, at the rate all are constructor and at the rate no are constructor. First we know about at the rate entity. At the rate entity, the Spring tells hibernates that this class should be mapped to a database table. Without this annotation, Hibernate will ignore the class. That purpose we can write at the rate entity. Okay, at the rate data. It is at the rate data is internally using Lambok. It generates getters, setters, toString, hash code and equals method. Automatically saves the time and reduce the boilerplate code. That purpose we can write at the rate data annotation. What is at the rate all are constructor? It creates a constructor with all fields. That purpose we can write at the rate all are constructor. And next one is no or constructor. It means create a default empty constructor. Okay, what is entity? What is at the rate id? At the rate id means it marks the primary key. It means unique identifier to each row in the table. That purpose we can write at the rate identity. What is this at the rate generating value and identity? It automatically generates the primary key and value in the database. It use auto increment, MySQL increment, like ID will generate 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. That purpose we can write these are the annotations. This is my entity class. We also write at the rate table also. It is not required, but if you not write, this class has a database table name. If suppose I wrote table name, this table name will shown in the database table. Customers, this name will show in the database. Okay, and next I will show service class. At the rate service, this means this class is at the rate service. It means service layer. It means it only we can write business logic here. Okay, at the rate service means what? Marks the class as a Spring service component. It meaning automatically detects it during component scanning and manage it in Spring Beans. This public class customer service implements user detail services. Implements user detail services. It means this class will provide custom user fetch logic from Spring Security during authentication. Spring Security calls internally load user by username method to retrieve user details from the database. That purpose we can write user detail services. What is at the rate auto void? It injects the dependencies automatically. I wrote private bicrypt password encoder and password encoder. And next one is I injected private customer repository and customer repository. This bicrypt password encoder is used to encrypt password before saving them in the database. Bicrypt internally adds the raw password making into the hashing password. What is this customer repository? It communicates with the database using JPA repository. That purpose I will injected this customer repository into customer service. Password encoder dot encode this method. Password dot encode inside customer dot get password. This customer dot set password encoding. It returns get ID details. What happened in this method? Save customer. This is the method save customer method. Okay, this password encoder dot encode. Okay, this is the reference of password encoder dot encode. What what is exactly does? Converted plain text password into a secured hashed format. It means encrypted format. Example, I can pass the password is my name is Bala Sankar @123. That is converted into the encrypted. I will show in last in encrypted style. It prevents store the raw password. Dependency security practice. What is this customer dot save customer? Save the customer record into the database. We can internally runs insert query. Okay, after saving I will return the id not equal to null. Okay, it generates the method returns true meaning success. Next one, this is the load user by username. This method is automatically called by Spring Security when user tries in login. Find by email ID. Okay, it fetch user details from the database. Okay, and return new user. New user converted to the customer object into Spring Security compatible to the user details object. Why these collection dot empty list? Okay, these represented actually authorized are roles. Currently returning empty means no roles I am assigned or no roles are assigned. Later we can replace it will it with roles like roles admin or roles user. Okay, I can pass here. These are the information in service layer. Next I will go to the REST controller. This is the REST controller class. Automatically convert returned value into the JSON because it combination of @controller and @request body. Okay, I wrote two dependencies. Dependency injection @auto customer service and authentication manager. Customer service means it customer services is used to save user data and load user details from the authentication. This authentication manager is a core Spring Security component that performs the exactly authentication. This is the login endpoint. I wrote response entity string login method. Okay, this endpoint exposes an API endpoint to handle the login request. Okay, this request body is accepted JSON object of customer from the client. Example in front end form. Here creating authentication token. I will create an object of username password authentication token. Who will give this token? Authentication filter chain. Internally give this token. If temporarily store the if username password authentication token is wrap user credential. If temporarily stores email password until authentication is completed. Okay, authentication, this method authenticate equal to authentication manager dot authenticate token. This information load user by username inside customer service that fetch user by email from the database, comparing the raw password with encoded password by using bycrypt. It returns authentication object. If success, it will give the success message, otherwise will throw an exception. If credentials are correct, the Spring Security returns an authentication object. Next one is this authenticated dot is authenticated is returns true, authentication is successful. I wrote the condition here. If authenticated is written new response entity, it give the success, it give the http status code. Otherwise it fails, it throw an exception like it failed message, http status is bad request. Next one is register endpoint. These endpoint handle saving the customer in database. Okay, this save method, response entity method, customers dot save customer, call the JSON methods which encrypted password to store the record. Okay, if customer saves, it gives the registration successfully, the status code is created. Otherwise it give the invalid message, it give the http status is internal server error. Now I am going to run this application. First I open my database. I drop my schema. I'll create new schema. This apply, and I will create the schema, new schema. This is my schema name. I will give here my in application.properties. My database name is login register. Now I will save this and I will run this application. Right click, go to run as Spring Boot app. Yeah, application is started. My default server is Tomcat. My default port number is 8080. Now I will go and check in Postman. This is my Postman page. I will give here endpoint. register endpoint. I will give data, name, Bala Sankar. Here this is my password. After then I will give my phone number. These are the details. I will give in JSON format, name, email, password and phone number. I give before here entity class information. See, name, email, password and phone number. These details I will pass in JSON format. This object is JSON object is converted into the Java object. We can pass in the request request body inside. So I will give here set. See, registration is successful. Registration is successful. Now I will enter into the login. Login. I will remove phone number and mail name. Only I will pass email and password. These are the details in login. Send it. Login successfully. Now we will go and check in database. See, this is the our database name. I will check here. See, this is the table name. Now before I told to you @table, I will give here customers, right? This name will reflect into the database. See, customers. I will show this table. See, this is the password by encrypted. Password encrypted. See, this is my name, Bala Sankar. This is my email ID and this is my password. What I gave password before, I'll give the number. JSON format. See, password is this one. This is the raw password. This password is converted encrypted password. Okay, this is all about it. Login and registration in Spring Security. Thank you so much.